Good morning. I'm delighted to be here and to take part in this. 200 years ago, if you had gone to England, you would have seen an economy that was really agricultural. There were green fields, there were sheep grazing, cattle, farmers, farms. There were a few canals around, windmills and things like that. But it was basically an agricultural economy around about 1810. If you'd gone back 40 years later, there'd still be plenty of green fields and agriculture, but there would have been large towns, large cities like Manchester and Birmingham. There were factories, there were textile mills, there was an awful lot of industry, and all of this was within 40 years. What happened in between was two technologies, or two bodies of technology. One was all of the textile machinery that had been invented in the late 1700s and really started to get used in the 1800s. And also the steam engine. So every 50, 60 years or so, complete new bodies of technology come along in the economy, and they completely and very quietly and silently change things in the economy. They change the way business is organized, they change the way society is organized, and eventually they even change the way government gets organized. We've had several of these revolutions first of all in Europe, then in America. Now the action, I think, is moving very much to Asia. And subsequent to the first industrial revolution I just mentioned in England, along came the railroads, and that was an enormous change when everything got connected. And then we had heavy engineering in Germany and in Europe, and eventually in the US and also in Asia, and that was in the 1880s. Then there was a big sweep of mass production in the 1910s, 1920s, about 100 years ago or less. And then in the 1950s and 60s, we got electronics and a lot of modern technology, which of course really switched on the Korean economy and made it one of the world leaders today. So the picture I want you to have in mind is that every so often a huge body of technology comes along, and it doesn't just grow the economy, but it changes its very character. It changes the way things are done in the economy. And there's a sort of strange thing goes with this. When all of this is happening, we don't really notice it. We might get excited about the individual technologies. There was a huge amount of excitement in England when railways came along in the 1830s and 1840s. But still, nobody quite noticed how that was changing the economy very quietly and very silently. So the question I want to ask this morning is whether there is any set of technologies that is changing the character of the economy today. And keep in mind, what I'm saying applies to the United States, where I currently live, to Europe, where I'm originally from, but also, of course, to Asia, at least to the very highly developed economies here, among which are Japan, Korea, Singapore, Taiwan, and China itself. So my question is there any really deep change happening in the economy at the moment? Now, one place, an obvious place to look would be the biological technologies, what we call biotech, or the genetic technologies, which are a subset of that. But I don't think that they've yet changed the character of anything. They haven't quite changed the economy anywhere. They're becoming increasingly important, especially where I live. I live in Silicon Valley, Santa Clara County, which is right in between Stanford and San Jose in California. Another possibility is nanotechnology, but again, I think that'll be important and will change the economy maybe in 40 or 50 years' time, but it's still too early. Now, an obvious candidate to be changing the economy very deeply is computers, or if you like, telecommunications. All the technologies we call information technology, or ICT, information and communications technology. The economy is becoming digitized. And when I first started to think about this, I began to think, well, what real difference is computation making? Maybe not that much. My bank has computerized a couple of decades ago or more. And we have social networking, we have the internet, we have smart telephones, which are telecommunications and computing. But really, is that changing the nature of the economy? Is that changing society itself in any way? And I would have thought 3 or 4 years ago, well, it's helping things go faster, but it's not really making a change in the character of the economy. But what I want to argue is that the digitization of the economy, or information technology, is indeed causing a very, very deep change in the character of the economy. It's one that's very subtle, but also very important and very deep. And the change is this: the tasks in the economy, business processes, whatever you want to call them, that were once carried out by human beings are increasingly being carried out digitally and in places within computers, of course, that we can't see. So human tasks are falling into this digital domain, and that's subtly and deeply causing an enormous change in the way the economy works. Let me give you an example here. 20 years ago or so, if I walked into an airport, or you walked into an airport, I would have had a paper ticket. Some of you may be too young to remember those, but I would have had a paper ticket. I would have walked up to the counter in the airport. I would have given my paper ticket to a human being. They might have entered something into a little computer on the desk. They'd take my luggage. They would tear off things in the paper ticket. They would make entries. All of the operations and tasks were done by human beings. Now, if I walk into an airport, I take out a card out of my wallet, maybe a frequent flyer card. I put it in a machine or a kiosk. This is Lufthansa, but I'm sure it's exactly the same in every airport, everywhere. You take out a card, you put it in a machine, nothing happens for about 3 or 4 seconds, and then there's a whir, and you get a boarding pass out, and maybe a luggage tag as well, or a receipt. Little paper things come out. What interests me is what happens in those 3 or 4 seconds. Something happens that you don't see. And if you start to think about what happens or read up on what happens is the moment I put in my card, certain computers that the machine is attached to start to recognize my name. They tick off my name on a passenger list. They check that I'm on the flight. They check my frequent flyer number. They start to query, am I a member of the frequent flyer club that might have access to lounges? They talk to other computers. Those other computers are talking, or servers in the jargon. Those other computers are talking to yet other computers that are checking me on security lists. And I'm from Northern Ireland, and you can bet that I am being checked with the National Security Agency in America if I am boarding a plane in the United States. Other computers may be talking to yet other computers, say in London or Korea, where I'm heading, checking with immigration. Is everything okay? Still other computers are talking to other ones about how the flight is loaded, where my seat will be, where all the passengers are sitting on the aircraft, whether the aircraft is getting ready. So what has happened is a gigantic conversation. You've triggered a whole conversation, underground, unseen, of servers talking to servers, computers talking to computers, and they're not just talking and triggering and executing tasks. They're querying, they're asking questions, they're getting back to each other, they're checking with each other. It's a huge digital conversation that started. And that digital conversation might be going on quite a bit afterwards. I often think of these computers on a big map of the world were to be lighting up, maybe a map of Korea or of the United States. You'd see computers light up all over the map, and even after I had left the airport, there may be still conversations going on where everything's getting updated because I put in my card originally. I could give you dozens of other examples. If I'm doing stock trading 20 years ago, it would have been people waving pieces of paper. Now something happens and computers are talking to computers, sometimes with a frequency of thousands of a second, 1,000th or 10,000th of a second, enormously fast, making bids and offers and trades, all digitally. All these tasks and processes are electronic. They're all invisible to me. I can't see them. So what I want to suggest is that we're in a position now where we have obviously a physical economy of human beings carrying out tasks, just like we had 30 years ago or 100 years ago. That's still valid. And machines that are physical carrying out tasks. But there is also another economy, an unseen, invisible economy that is silent, a second economy of processes, executing processes digitally. And when I started to do a few calculations on this, that economy looks to me as if it's not quite as big as the physical economy. It's hard to measure these things, and economists haven't yet begun to measure this, but it's very, very large indeed. And certainly this is as true in Korea as it is in the United States. We have a physical economy now, and underneath that we have a very large digital economy. I started to think of ways to describe or adjectives for this second digital economy that is so busy, and I came up with these ones. These are just a sample of descriptors you could use for this digital second economy. It's vast, it's enormous. For us, it's silent. It's going on all over the place. It's not just one computer for everything that's local. It's all interconnected. As I say, it's invisible and unseen. It's remotely executing. I could be doing something here, and that could affect computers in Rome. As all of you know, tiny things happen in Greece, and the New York stock market, and no doubt the stock market here as well, reacts maybe within seconds. It's global. It's globally connected. There's no on-off switch. This is on, always on, 24 hours a day. All of the architecture of this system is reconfigurable and endlessly configuring itself. The whole system is self-organizing. Its architecture is changing appropriately. It's added to, it's subtracted from, and in real time it keeps changing, and it's self-healing. Now, self-healing and self-organizing and self-architecting and self-correcting, those sound like biological systems. If you cut me, I'm self-healing. Part of my brain, I hope, is self-organizing. everything we do in our brains is reconfiguring and self-configuring. These are biological descriptors. And so I began to think of this second digital economy, this highly interconnected set of digital processes talking to other digital processes. I began to think of it metaphorically as like a very large root system. It's a root system maybe for physical trees that are in the physical, that represent the physical economy. Let me describe to you what I have in mind. I did a lot of work in Santa Fe, in New Mexico. And in New Mexico and Colorado, we have large forests of aspen trees. Aspen trees are different from ordinary trees. One ordinary tree has its own set of roots, and another ordinary tree neighboring it has its own set of roots. Aspen trees are different. Aspen roots are all interconnected underground in an enormous system. For every acre of aspen trees, there are 10 miles of roots just below the ground. So in an aspen forest, you have a root system that's highly interconnected. It's always renewing itself. It could be as much as 500,000 years old. These are very, very old root systems. And then every so often they'll put up little aspen trees, little shoots that come up above the ground, and that root system will continue to grow and configure itself. So I'm thinking of the economy like that. Above the ground you have this aspen forest. Those are the trees that you can see. Below, there's the digital economy, configuring, reconfiguring, the two connecting and speaking to each other, the physical economy interacting with the root economy just below the ground, the digital economy that's so highly interconnected, but to us invisible. So far, I've been emphasizing that the digital economy is a network of, if you like, things talking to things, computers talking to computers, computers and servers talking to satellites that are talking to atomic clocks, everything's in conversation with everything else digitally, and then doing things in the physical economy, putting up little shoots, taking actions, if you like. And one quality that strikes me, that got me really thinking when I started to think about this, is that increasingly this is giving us another sort of intelligence. Now, we have human intelligence. If you're a professor like me, sometimes you can debate whether there is that much intelligence around. But what is happening, this digital economy, is that it's starting to give us a second sort of intelligence, meaning it's sensing the world in some way, just like an animal does. Think of a jellyfish. It's sensing its world, computing, conversing with other things that are sensing the world, and then taking appropriate action. And I think that this sort of intelligence is an enormous part of what's coming in this digitized economy. Let me explain again with an example. About 2 years ago, my daughter and I were driving on Highway 280. It's actually near Stanford in California, and we kept noticing this rather strange white car on the other side of the road. It was a normal car, painted white. There was very little on it. On its top it had some sort of a device, and it looked almost like a radar system, and I was thinking, what on earth is this? And we commented on it. Then 2 or 3 weeks later we saw something like it again, a similar car, maybe the same car. But it was a very odd looking car. There was nobody in the driver's seat. Now, this is very strange. You've probably all heard of this car. It's the Google driverless car. This has taken several years of development. In fact, there's a Korean American called Dennis Hong. You might know many of you might know him. He's at Virginia Tech, robotics expert, and he's done a lot of work on this driverless car. Now, there's more than robotics at stake here. What's at stake is a lot of artificial intelligence. This car has actually traveled 140,000 miles with no accidents at all. It's not quite no accidents because at one stage it was stopped in front of a red light in a town and somebody rear-ended the car. It wasn't the driverless car's mistake at all, it was just sitting there and somebody made a mistake. But think of what that really means. I find this staggering. I'm sure you've heard of the Google car. But what's staggering about it is that it can drive at night. It can drive down extremely crowded streets and heavy traffic. It can make left turns. Making left turns means that you, in America and here as well, you have to be watching traffic coming from several directions. You have to be watching traffic lights. You have to be watching pedestrians. So it can sense all these things, and it knows when to turn and when to hold back. It can recognize its environment. If there's joggers going down the street, it can recognize those. If there's small animals coming out on the road at night, say like a cat or a dog or a squirrel, it actually recognizes those. My mind is sort of boggled by imagining what it takes to put that sort of intelligence into a car. I want to keep emphasizing here that this isn't just computation and communications. Just as I was saying with the airport example, the Google driverless car is in conversation with a number of other computers, GPS systems, which means satellites, clocks, etc. There's many things that the driverless car is conversing with, so it's very much part of this networked economy. But what I want to emphasize is the sensing. It can sense its environment just as I can or you can and take appropriate action, and in very, very, very challenging circumstances. I find this amazing, actually. Once a car can sense its environment, it can obviously sense other cars. And so this leads me to a prediction that I think is something of a no-brainer. This street actually is in Korea, but I would imagine in about 10 years' time, maybe a little bit less, maybe a little bit more, there will be cars that are sensing other cars in traffic, and therefore we will have driverless traffic. You will get into your car, possibly sit in the back seat, maybe eventually there will be no steering wheel at all or no controls, you can sit in the front seat. And maybe your grandchildren, maybe even my grandchildren be saying, "Oh, Grandpa, is it true that when you were young you used to drive your car? What was that like? That must have been very dangerous because there were all sorts of idiots on the road in those days, but you survived that." So what is going to seem normal in 2050 isn't at all what's normal to us. The point I want to make here is that we have not just things talking to things and executing things that we need in the economy. It's increasingly becoming an economy where things are sensing things, taking intelligent action, intelligent on our own behalf. Now, I don't know whether I find that a bit scary or not, but certainly it's a deep, deep change that's coming. It's not just that we can carry out tasks, it's not just that we have information technology that can carry out many things that are very comfortable and improve wealth and help us greatly. It's that computation or digitization is starting to give us systems that can sense things and react appropriately. And when you start to think of that, that's going to be true maybe in surgical operations. We're certainly pretty close to that, of sensing where things are, sensing where blood systems are, maybe making laparoscopic incisions, these tiny little incisions, carrying out operations, all without anybody being in the room by machine. Now, again, I don't want to be scary, but I think this sort of thing is coming down the road. Before I talk more about that, I want to point out that all of this picture that I'm giving does have a problem. In fact, there's a very large problem associated with it, and it's very, very palpable or feelable in the United States at the moment, and that's the problem of jobs. As things digitize, as tasks digitize and go into this digital economy, we're losing jobs. 20 years ago at Stanford, I had a secretary. Secretaries are now almost a thing of the past. We have personal assistants, but we don't have anyone to do the typing because we do word processing. So we've lost secretaries. We've lost, to a very large extent, draftsmen. Now architects automatically have their drawings set out digitally. We've lost paralegals. We've lost telephone operators. The list goes on and on and on. We've even lost largely the people in the post office who read letter addresses and then sorted your letters. Now that's done digitally as well. So we're losing a lot of jobs. And I think of a kind of rising tide of digitization. That's the blue sea here. And what's left are these islands of jobs. Just what is on these islands? Well, they're the intuitive jobs, the jobs that need judgment. I'm thinking of things like being a policeman. That requires very fine judgment as to how you interact with people, how you intervene, what you're going to go after. Jobs that require empathy, such as being a school teacher, a primary school teacher. Jobs that require judgment, maybe like being a lawyer or being a judge or being a doctor and knowing an awful lot about prognosis. These jobs haven't yet disappeared. And again, when I started to think about that, I was thinking, well, thank God there are some jobs left. I'm a researcher and a professor. I teach and I think and I write, and I'm hoping that I can hold on to my job, and I'm sure all of you can as well, before I'm replaced by something that's highly digitized. But this is a huge concern at the moment in the United States. What's said in the press is that we've lost jobs first to Japan, partly to Korea, because a lot of the manufacturing is done here. And above all, we've lost jobs to China and India. And that, people are saying, well, it's wonderful, we have all these goods coming in from Asia, but where are the jobs? Actually, I'm sure a lot of that is true, but what's happening is that a lot of these jobs, such as telephone operators that I just mentioned, paralegals, have gone extinct due to digitization. And I think this is a much bigger effect than what's happened with the rise of China and India and other economies in Asia, a much bigger effect. So we're running a 10% unemployment rate in the United States. It's certainly the biggest issue there is politically in the US. It's affecting Europe as well. Korea and other economies in Asia are much better set up because you have such strong manufacturing here, and those jobs aren't quite as easily digitized, not yet anyway. So I'm concerned that jobs are disappearing into the sea of digitization. And then I began to think, well, that rising sea of digitization is going to stop somewhere. All these intuitive jobs will be left. But then again, here's something else that I'm sure you've thought of, and I have thought of. Will digitization be able to challenge and take over many tasks that we would say are tasks of human intuition? I'm sure you've heard of this, but in the last 2 or 3 years, last 5 years or so, IBM developed a supercomputer. They called it Watson, after the founder of IBM. And IBM's Watson supercomputer was specialized to do one job. It was designed to play a quiz game on television called Jeopardy! Now, my first thought when I was told about this, I was told about this in IBM Almaden, where I'd been doing some work. That's the think tank for IBM. It's a place of very, very smart people. They said, by the way, we're developing a computer to play Jeopardy! And I said, well, okay, play Jeopardy! That just means looking up a few facts. Surely that's trivial. Actually, it's not trivial. You can teach a computer to play chess, which of course IBM did. But you can play a pretty good game of chess, good enough to beat Kasparov anyway. You can play an excellent game of chess if you're willing to enumerate all the possibilities, go down branches, do a lot of arithmetic, what computers are good at, evaluate many, many possible trees, many possible moves, and then go for the best. Computers are very good at that, but that's pure logic largely. It's a lot of pure arithmetic. Jeopardy is different. Jeopardy asks questions where the answers are part knowledge and part intuition. I'm fishing out a question. This is a typical question from Jeopardy! I never watched it until IBM got involved. Here's the question. This is a question. Arizona's state motto, Ditat Deus, means he enriches. That's the question. So I'll read it again. You're in the audience. Arizona's state motto, the little label under the state, Ditat Deus, 2 Latin words, means he enriches. And that's a question. The answer to that is God. So the computer's meant to say, state motto means he enriches. Oh, maybe the answer to the question is, who is he? Okay, well, if that's the answer to the question, who is he, then there's 2 words here. They must be in Latin. But I'm a computer, and I've been taught Latin and French and German and highly likely Korean. And so I can talk Latin, and I can figure out that Deus in Latin means God. So maybe God is, in the Western world, a he. Notice all the intuition and all the associations. This isn't logic at all. This is something very loose and very cognitive. And the computer's meant to figure all this out and somehow develop the intuition. I don't know if you watched the actual Jeopardy! Show. I did, and I was very, very intrigued by the whole thing. But the IBM machine beat, these are the 2 champion players of all time playing Jeopardy! Human beings, extraordinarily bright, extraordinarily well informed, and the computer beat them very easily. So again, think about this. This isn't a matter of logic. It's not a matter of just pure knowledge. It's a matter of the computer being programmed to think associatively, to make connections, the sort of neural connections we find very, very easy to make, but computers find very difficult. So what I want to put to you is that if you think about all these digital tasks, they're not just, say, getting some machine to read my bad handwriting on a letter and toss that letter into the appropriate batch at the post office so it can travel in the right direction. We're entering a world now where digitization means taking on intuitive tasks. This has been a huge problem in computing since computing started 50, 60 or more years ago. We said, okay, we can get computers to add numbers, computers to do our accounts and banking. All of banking and finance has gone digital. Financial markets all operate digitally. Human beings are scarcely involved in financial markets, but that's all numbers. 70% of transactions on the New York stock market are now made digitally. The other transactions are executed digitally, but human beings are making the decisions. So we're entering a world that's not just digital tasks being executed remotely, me pressing a button here and something happening 50 or 500 or 5,000 miles away. We're entering a world where delicate, intelligent tasks are being decided, maybe appropriately, I hope appropriately, in an intelligent way by digitization. Used to be I would go to my doctor, and if I had some very peculiar set of symptoms, I'd need to go to a specialist. If the specialist couldn't diagnose those symptoms, I'd go to a specialist diagnostician. People with more and more intuitive knowledge and more intuitive judgment. I'd say within 5 years, 10 years, a lot of that will have become digitized too. Now, I'm not saying that all of this is wonderful, but it's certainly leading us into a very, very, very different world. I don't know when we will have computers sitting in judgment in a law court. I hope I'm not around to see it. There are many other things I hope I don't see. But I think what I can safely predict is that within the next 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, we will see things that we could never have imagined in the year 2011 that could be carried out digitally. I want to finish with this thought. To summarize what I was saying, we have a physical economy, human beings carrying out all these tasks, physical machines carrying out all these tasks, humans interacting with machines, and so on. That's been around for the last 2 centuries. What is now happening and forming, almost as we speak, is a second economy of digital processes, highly networked, becoming increasingly intelligent, interacting with the physical human economy and us interacting with that economy. This is not science fiction. It's not the coming of the singularity, to use a fashionable phrase in Silicon Valley. It's here already. It's here just as much in Korea as it is anywhere else in the world. It's causing jobs to disappear. It's causing an awful lot of prosperity. And I want to finish with this thought. When I talk about this or I write about this, people ask me, is this a big change? I say, yes, it is. Is it the biggest change since the Industrial Revolution? And I say, yes, I do believe it is. Is it the biggest change ever in the economy? And I want to say, I'm an economist, I'm a professor, I have an academic reputation to defend, I like to be conservative, I don't like to stick my neck out very far, but I do believe that this set of changes is the biggest set of changes we have ever had in the economy. 200 years ago, where I started, when the steam engine came along and trains came along, what you could say is that the economy got automatic power. We didn't have to use horses and animals to produce power or human sweat. Machines produced power, so you could say the economy developed a muscular system, just like a human body. The economy 200 years ago develops a muscular system to make it all work. Now, with the coming of this digital layer that can sense and give back appropriate action, I want to suggest that the economy is developing intelligence, an automatic intelligence. The economy is developing a neural layer, a neural system. I hope it's not malign. I hope it's nothing bad. I don't think it is necessarily, but it's something different. The economy is developing not just muscles now, but intelligence. And there is no limit to this whatever. This can deepen and deepen and deepen. It's a very different world. It's completely remaking our world. It's creating for us a very different world. And I think this is where humanities and culture come in. If we are lucky, we will be freed of difficult, nasty tasks that require boredom and a lot of human effort that doesn't lead to much deepening. If we use this correctly, we can have more time to be creative, more time for music, more time to develop poetry, more time to deepen ourselves as human beings. I'll stop there. Thank you very much.